All right, good afternoon. Trust you enjoyed your lunch. Did a few calisthenics, get the blood flowing again. You should be in the same room where you were for the breakout group this morning. We're switching speakers, not groups. So if you were in the music room this morning and want to hear a new presentation, you should go back to the music room. Very good. So our afternoon session here, we are blessed to have Dr. Marianne Thomas with us, who is with One More Child, and going to just continue to enlighten us. You know, at our last presentation 2 weeks ago, Katie and Marianne said they didn't want to scare us to death. They wanted to open our eyes wide open. And I think, for me anyway, it's a little bit of both, some of the things that they share. But very important. And again, I'm glad that you're here to be a part of this so that we can all continue to work together to help those that are caught in this trap. So Marianne, thank you for being here, and come on up.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. My name is Marianne Thomas. I am the Director of Anti-Trafficking for One More Child. And what we do is we serve human trafficking victims ages 10 to 28, male or female, and assist them with whatever they might need. Some of that is counseling, some of that is mentorship, and then some of that is advocacy services, where we go and help connect them to other services, maybe some services you all are connected with, and help them in any way that they need. And we serve across the state of Florida in 5 different circuits, including right here in Polk County. And so that's why I'm here to talk to you today, is about how we actually serve survivors, what we can do, how to work with survivors, and what that looks like for a community. So just show of hands, how many of you are working in social services now or about to be working in social services? Okay, awesome. Those of you who are already working in the field, have you worked with human trafficking survivors that you know of? Not as many people then. I'm going to guess if you work in social services, you've come across human trafficking survivors. We are all over the place. I say we and us a lot. I am a survivor myself, and so I naturally refer to it as we and us. We show up for services. We show up at food banks. We show up at the free clinics. We show up in DCF, whether it be because we are in DCF care or because our parents have done something to get us there. Or you'll see our children as we grow up and we start to have children. And that's part of my story too, is that my children needed services that weren't available because of my life. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. So we know what we're doing. You guys have had HT 101. Now you talked to Katie Ann a little bit and probably learned a little bit about what human trafficking is and what it looks like. Now we're going to start to talk about what we do after that. Once we've identified someone, what are we going to do about getting them help? And the first thing is knowing your community resources. One More Child is just one resource in your community. There are lots. You can go to those tables out there. There are lots of resources in your community. But knowing where to point a person is an important step. And so if you yourself want to work with someone, how do you first encounter us? If you have come across us, you found us somewhere in the community probably. We've come to you for services. You met us in your church. There's somewhere that you've met us. So that's going to be your opening, right? You want to get to know us on the level that you're at. And I said this in the last group if you guys were next door. What you don't want to do is come at us with any sort of authority. That doesn't work well. We don't work with law enforcement well. And so if you come to us with authority, we're not really going to respond well. If you want us to respond, you come to us as you are, and you meet us where we are. So if I'm dirty and gross and sitting out in a ditch, I need you to be willing to sit in that ditch with me. If you're going to want to hover over me and stand over me in that ditch, I'm not going to listen to you. So the first part is getting to know us and being able to meet us where we are, however that is. And I don't mean you have to change who you are or what you are, but you have to be willing to step into my world. My world isn't pretty. My world doesn't look like the world that you might normally be in. So I need you to be willing to be uncomfortable in whatever it is and be willing to be uncomfortable with me. The next part of that is being authentically who you are. If you want me to believe you and you want me to trust you, you have to show me who you are first. I'm not going to trust you if you are being fake. You have to be authentically whoever you are in order for me to have trust. What don't trafficking survivors ever have? Trust, right? We don't trust anybody. People have let us down a lot. People have lied to us a lot. People who had good intentions even gave us misinformation. None of that works with us. I need you to be honest with me. That means if you can't help me, you tell me you can't help me. If you're going to have to ask somebody else for some answers, you tell me that. We don't hear maybes either. This is a hard one for us. If you say maybe to me, I heard yes. Okay, so I need you to be very clear with your no's and very clear with the I have to get more information or I have to find other resources. Maybe doesn't work for us, but if you tell us yes, you need to follow through with whatever that was. If something comes up, let's say it's an appointment, you tell me you're going to see me on Tuesday at 10 a.m. You get in a car wreck on the way there. I need you to tell me that you got in a car wreck on the way there. You can't just not show up on me. If something comes up and somebody's coming instead of you, you need to prepare me for that because I will bolt at the first chance that I get. It takes a lot to get us to trust you. And so you, especially in those beginning times when you're building trust, I need you to really be above board with everything you do and say so that I'm able to trust you to get to the point where we can have a relationship. Because that's what it takes, ultimately, if you want to work with us, is you have to be able to have a relationship with us. And for those of you in the social services, that's hard, right? Because we're always worried about where is that boundary for that proper relationship? How do I have a relationship with somebody that is authentic, but I don't let it bleed over into my private life? And that is the line that you have to be able to draw because I need you to authentically care about me as a person and still go home and sleep at night when things don't quite work out. And for you guys working in the field, that is the hard part because you're going to hear the hard stories. You're going to hear the tough details. And you're going to want to take that home at night. You're going to sometimes feel like you don't have a choice but to take it home at night. But I need you to hear that for all of us, for every survivor, I need you to have great self-care. I need you to be able to set that down and walk away. I need you to be able to live your life and really not think about me in the off times because that is what makes you sustainable for this work. And that's what's important. So I need you to authentically care about me, but also know that it's for a season. Every relationship with a trafficking survivor is for a season. We're not here for the long term, and you shouldn't think that you're here for the long term either. I like to say I'm a seed planter. I get to work with girls and boys as they're coming out of trafficking. Some of them want to come out of trafficking. They recognize that their life has been bad and they want out of it. Some of them don't recognize that yet. Some of them are still actively in trafficking situations, or their family is a part of it, or there are other reasons why they're not quite ready to walk away. If I took all of that personally and took it home at night, I would never sleep, right? And so I have to be able to walk alongside those girls and boys, understand what they're going through to whatever level I am capable, and then be able to let it go and give it up to God each night. Because I can't harbor all of that either. That's not healthy for me, and I wouldn't be sustainable in this work if I did. And so that's why it's so important for you to build that relationship so that I'm going to trust you in the field, but also understand that whatever decisions I make as a survivor are not on you. So when I go back to that trafficker, as much as that's going to hurt your heart, it's also part of the process. And I need you to be able to understand that. I heard a statistic just this week that for domestic violence victims, they go back an average of 7 times. Human trafficking survivors, it's way higher than that, and I don't even know what the number is. I just know from my own personal experience, lots of times good people tried to pull me out of that world, and I couldn't stay in your world. I just couldn't. Part of that is because I'm not comfortable in your world. Survivors aren't comfortable in your world. Your world looks a lot different than whatever we've been living. I didn't know what it looked like to have that regular family. I didn't know what it looked like to have normal friends. My friends were doing the same thing I was doing. And so to be around normal people like that for so long can be draining, even now, that I have to be in this world that is not familiar to me, that I have to learn to adapt to. So I want you to remember that when you're working with survivors, as they're fresh coming out, they don't feel comfortable in your world. And even though you give them the prettiest of rooms and you give them a nice space and all of the security that they could ask for, it's unfamiliar to them and they don't know what to do with it. It actually hurts a little bit because it feels like, why are you giving me all this nice stuff and you're not asking for anything in return? And that's what makes it really hard. We don't know how to accept that. And so as you're offering it, we give you pushback, and you'll try to give us nice things, and we're going to lie to you, we're going to steal from you, and we're going to tell you we don't want you. That's all we know, and we've never known anybody who was just kind for no reason. We're going to give you pushback. Expect the pushback. Don't take it personally. And I'll be the first to tell you, I work with some teenage girls. They will find whatever you don't like about yourself, and they will use it against you. You don't like your legs, they are going to talk about your legs all day long. They can pick out those things, and it sure feels personal sometimes, but it's actually not. It's not intended to be personal. That's the only life they know, is that's how they relate to people. That's how people have related to them. Because it's pertinent, I feel like I should tell you a little bit about my life so you can understand what I'm talking about. I grew up in a church. I grew up in a church much like this, a nice Baptist church, where I went 7 days a week. That is not an exaggeration. I was on every church team you could be on as a child. I participated in every single event that they had at the church, and my dad was a deacon at the church. I grew up in the church. However, behind closed doors, my dad was a different person. My dad was an abuser. My dad is the person who groomed me, who taught me how to use my body for something else. And so I was getting mixed messages. I was going to church all the time, and I was hearing that Jesus loved me and that I was supposed to present a certain way and always wear dresses past my knees. I failed today. And always, that's okay, I was also taught to wear shorts under them. But always wear dresses past my knees, never cut my hair. I had a very strict upbringing. And yet behind closed doors, there was something else happening. And so my ideas on what love is and what love looks like got very skewed at a very young age. By the time I was 15, my father had decided he was done with me and had kicked me out of the house. And so I became a homeless teenager at the age of 15. At that time, I had zero resources. I didn't have any sort of education. I'd been skipping the last 2 years of school anyhow, so who knows how much of that I even understood. I had not been in any real trouble yet. I hadn't really committed any crimes yet. My dad had just decided that I was too much and kicked me out. I knew it was coming. He had kicked out all of my older siblings at a similar age, so it wasn't a big surprise to me. I just kind of went, yeah, okay, that makes sense, and I left. But what nobody tells you is what happens to that 15-year-old once they're out in the streets. I had no food, no shelter, no clothing. I didn't even leave. I had a backpack. And so what do you do then? What does a 15-year-old do? Well, first, I slept on different couches. Anybody who would let me. If you had a couch and you said I could sleep there, I would sleep there. I didn't care if I knew you or not. And I slept on some friends' couches. And after a couple days, their parents would say, "Why is Marianne still on our couch?" And that would be the end of it. They would just say, "Tell her to go home." and people would tell me to go home. But I didn't have a home to go to. And so parents did put eyes on me, did see that something was wrong, and still didn't notice. I also went to school. I continued to go to school even after I was kicked out. There became a problem at school. I got in trouble. I skipped school at lunchtime, and I wanted to go to Burger King instead of eat school lunch. And so when I was coming back onto the school property, they stopped me and they said, well, we need to call your parents. I said, well, good luck to you. And when they found out I didn't have any active parents, they didn't know what to do with me. They also didn't call authorities. They also didn't ask where I was sleeping. They also didn't do anything for me. So all of these people in the community had eyes on me, knew that something was wrong, and all of them just thought it wasn't their business. I told you I went to church 7 days a week. I all of a sudden quit going to church. I'd been in the church my entire life. And when I disappeared from the church, and I learned this later from my mother told them that they were teaching me tough love because I had been a bad kid. The only thing I had ever done was sneak out of my house to go to a fair once. That was it. And so that was what the church decided was an acceptable form of punishment at that time, and said, oh yeah, that makes sense. You're teaching her a lesson about sneaking out. And so everybody in my community who should have been safe people, my school, my church, my friends, everybody failed me. Everybody turned and looked a different direction and decided I was not their problem. And that's why I come to talk to you guys today, because I want you to think that I am your problem. That when you see me in the community, it's your problem. It's your problem when you see me at the store. It's your problem when you see me come into your Sunday school. It's your problem. Because what happened to me from there, I thought life was bad up until that point. I had no idea how bad life could possibly get. That is why I work with the teenagers. People ask me all the time, why do you like teenagers? They're mouthy, they say nasty things, they're awful. I agree, and I love every bit of it. But it's because I know that no matter how bad life has been up until this point, it can get so much worse. And that's what we don't want to see. We don't want to see these kids as they grow into adults and they end up getting arrested for prostitution over and over and over. We don't want to see these kids that end up with a drug addiction because they just have to numb out the pain of what their daily existence is. And that's part of my story. My second trafficker got me addicted to cocaine. It's a very good way to control a person. And then you don't even have to ask me to do anything so much anymore. All you have to do is withhold my drug. I'll do anything to get that. Once you've taught somebody that they have no control, you can literally do anything. I don't know how many of you come from a social work background in here, but there is something that we learn in school. It's called learned helplessness. And this is best illustrated by the elephants at the zoo. I love elephants. It's kind of my spirit animal. I really love elephants a lot. But the elephants at the zoo don't run away. We see them, they have that chain on their foot, and we see them and they don't run away. They stand there, they do their little thing, they go back to that little chain on their foot. I don't know if you've ever really paid attention, but an elephant's quite a large creature, right? It could probably be pretty strong, one would think. That chain on their foot does not hold them. It doesn't. What happened is when that elephant was a baby elephant, they put the heavy chain on their foot so that the baby elephant couldn't lift it. And the baby elephant's brain learned that it can't move the chain, and so now the adult elephant just thinks it can't move the chain. That adult elephant could leave anytime it wanted to. That's exactly what this looks like for human sex trafficking survivors. People ask all the time, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you go away? Especially if you look at my life. I was free to come and go as much as I wanted. And so people say, well, why didn't you just leave? Didn't really know that I could. I did know that my trafficker would get violent if I tried to leave. That's a good deterrent. But I really never thought that there was anything else out there. My whole life had been abuse. I never really thought that there would be a time ever that someone wouldn't use me or abuse me in some way. And so when you good-meaning people come to me and want to help me, I don't believe you. My life has taught me that I cannot believe you. And that's why it's so important for you to be consistent. You have to keep coming back. No matter how many times I say, I don't want to work with you, ignore me, keep coming back. No matter how many times I push you away or say horrible and mean and ugly things, I need you to just not believe any of those things and keep coming back. That is what will get me to understand that you really want to help me, is your ability to stay persistent in the face of whatever I might throw at you. My story goes on. I was passed around through several traffickers, and I had 4 children during the course of that time. And so that's another great way to keep control over somebody, is have control over their children. And so when you see these moms coming in with these young kids, and you think, well, why would she live that way? Why would she do that with her kids right there? Because she doesn't know any better. Because she doesn't know she can leave. Because her trafficker may well be her husband. And how do you walk away from that? I went to therapy once. I went again after that. But one particular time, I was forced into therapy by DCF. My trafficker/husband had attempted to run me over with his truck in front of my child. And because someone heard that, somebody else reported it to DCF. I did not. And I had been away from him for several years at this point. I had been out of his clutches. And so it got reported to DCF, and we were all mandated to go to counseling, my son, my ex-husband, and myself. The Christian counselor, in hearing that we were married and not actually legally divorced, said to my trafficker and to me that she thought we should work it out. So even after I left, even after I thought I was on the right path, I was in school, I thought I was doing good. There's somebody else telling me, no, but that's your husband. You don't leave him. It's very important that you think about what you say to us. It's very important that you approach each person understanding that you don't know their past. You would not have looked at me and said, oh, she absolutely was a prostitute. That didn't happen. I presented well in public. That was one of the reasons that people got away with it for so long, is you could take me places. I did clean up well. And I could put on a face and play a game out in public. And because of that, people overlooked me a lot, or thought, she wants to do that. She's there because she wants to be there. I played all the games. It takes time to break through that shell. It takes time to get us to show you who we really are. But the only way to get us help is to get us to that point and to be willing to put the time in. Traffickers put the time in to get to know children in order to abuse them. That movie, Taken, is a great movie. It's very entertaining, but I'm sure you've already heard today that's not what 95% of trafficking looks like. Most of it is they come to you as a friend. They get to know you first. They get to know what your hopes are, what your fears are, and they use those to build a relationship with you. And then, through that relationship, they help to isolate you from all that you know. They help to isolate you from people who might care. And then they have control over you. Then they can get you to do anything they want, and they don't have to do anything awful. They don't have to beat you anymore. They know you're going to comply. If a trafficker puts in that much time, you all have to put in double the time. it will take longer. Our brain has already been programmed for abuse. Our brain has already been programmed to obey. And we don't pick the right people to follow. If all I know is abuse, I don't know how to follow the person who's good in my life. I can remember dating a boy once in my early 20s, in between traffickers, who did not do drugs, did not have any part of that life, just some nice, normal boy who stumbled upon me. And we dated for about a year, and I can remember trying so hard to look normal, whatever that meant, to show him that I could be normal. It was all I could think about was, okay, this is a normal person. You have to figure out how to be normal too. During the whole time I dated him, there was still a trafficker controlling me. During the whole time I dated him, he thought maybe I had some idiosyncrasies, but didn't understand exactly what it was. I went to work, and I came home, and I had money. I didn't know how to live his life. I didn't know how to be in that world as much as I wanted it. It also scared me to death because I really didn't know how to behave. I really didn't know how to act, and I felt so weird all of the time. People want to help us, and they want to build us beautiful homes for us to live in. They invite us into beautiful churches, and they take us out to nice dinners, just trying to help. And it hurts us so much because we don't know how to behave. We feel like we're not dressed appropriately. We feel like we don't have the right clothes. We feel like we don't do it the right way. Whatever it is, we recognize that we don't look like you, and we feel like we wear that badge of abuse on us. We feel like everyone knows and everyone can see. And so when you invite us to these beautiful events, it's nice, but it also hurts us because we don't know how to handle it. We're much better if you're willing to come to McDonald's with us. We're much better if you're willing to just sit on the ground outside with us and talk to us, because we don't know how to handle it when you give us too much, and it's overwhelming for us. We take a lot of those traits with us, all of those things that we learned in the abuse. We take them with us throughout our lives. I have several of them myself. My team is well aware of how I function, and they get a good chuckle out of some things that I have that are a carryover from that life. One of which is control. After having been controlled for so long, I have a very staunch thought on who should control me now. And so I don't like people telling me what to do, and I will push back when you tell me what to do, even when it's for my own benefit. And I'm still learning in that way, hopefully. But that's part of it, is we take that and we still have those problems. Whatever we had in the abuse comes with us and is amplified outside of the abuse. And so when you're working with us, it seems like we're resistant when it's really our trafficking skills. I hear the word manipulative a lot. We are. I agree with that. It's also called strategic if you put us in a business sense, though. So all of those manipulation skills that I used in the streets to keep me alive and to keep me safe, they're not so nice in society. People don't like that when you manipulate them. And so learning how to take our traits that we brought from that world and turn them into strengths, like saying, oh, that is very strategic of you. And how would you go about getting what you want? And let's see how we can do it legally now. And let's see how we can do it ethically now. That's all part of it. Being willing to be with us in that space as we're growing, as we're learning, is very important. I spent 17 years under the hands of traffickers. 17 years of my life that are just gone. I don't want to see other kids have to go through that. And I would love to sit here and talk to you about the demand all day long, because that's how we really stop this, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So I want to talk about what happens now. What happened for me is one person said to me over and over and over, "You don't have to do this." Now, I didn't believe that person, even for a second. And he came to me. It started with homework. I helped him with his homework because I happened to like math a lot. So even though I was skipping school, I had enough math in my head and I enjoyed it and it just stuck. And so I had been helping him with his homework. And he said to me, "I think you're kind of smart. You should go to college." Well, I knew I had a GED, and I wasn't sure how that worked. I was pretty sure that you couldn't go to college with a GED. And to be honest, the only reason I had a GED is because my second trafficker told me that I was embarrassing to his family because I had dropped out of high school. And so he made me get a GED, so thank you for that. But I had a GED, and I didn't think you could go to college. And so when this guy's telling me go to college, I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. But he kept saying it. I kept helping with his homework. He was really bad at math. So I kept helping him with his homework, and he kept saying, "You should go to college." And I kept saying no. But he didn't stop there. He said, "How about I pay for your first class?" I thought, well, that's awful nice, but still, no. And I don't know why, and he's still my friend to this day. I'm sure I could ask him. But for whatever reason, he knew that he couldn't just tell me to go. When you're being trafficked, you don't have the ability to plan and to decide what you're going to do from one day to the next. Someone has always told you what you're going to do each day. And so many of us have very poor planning skills. We're not good at looking into the future and doing the tasks that need to be done. And so somehow he just knew this about me. I don't know how. But he not only paid for my first class, what he did is he took me to the school, walked me to the registration office, walked me up there, and I was scared. I thought, first of all, I was older than most college students. I was 32 when I got out of the life. So I was afraid of being older. I was sure everybody knew that I was dirty. I was sure that everybody was like, "What is she doing here? She only has a GED. She shouldn't be here." I was positive they were talking about me. But he persisted. And he took me to that registration window, and he helped me set up my first classes. He paid for my first semester. And then on the first day of school, he walked me to my class. That's the kind of persistence it takes. Because once he did that, there was no stopping me. Once I got that first A at the end of the year, I never looked back, and I jumped full throttle into school. That's why I'm standing here today, is because one person kept saying, "You can do different," and didn't just say it, but literally showed me step by step how to do it. Without that, I wouldn't be here, and I know that. I know that because I was still going to keep doing what I knew to do every day until somebody put a very sharp fork in the road for me and made it, "You have to make it easy for us." That life is already easy for us. We have a saying in the life, and it really pertains to when you're switching out traffickers, but it works for a lot of things. The hell you know is better than the hell you don't know. So I already know how this person treats me. At least I know what I got to put up with. I don't know what this person's going to do. And that's how we feel about even coming with you guys and walking alongside you all and walking out of that life. I already know what that life feels like. I already know what it looks like. I already know everything I need to know about it. I know how to survive in that life well. 17 years. You don't get 17 years in anything without understanding it really well. So for me to walk out of that, somebody had to try just as hard as every single trafficker ever tried. And that's what I'm asking you all to do. So I am asking you to jump in this fight with me. I can't do it alone. I can go all over and I can talk to you guys all day long, but unless you're willing to tell your friends and your neighbors and pay attention, then it does me no good. I need you checking your Sunday school classes. I need you paying attention to the kids you come in contact with. I need you reaching out to the people who seem less than desirable. There's a story there. And even if it's not human trafficking, nobody is in that position because they want to be. I can promise you that. Everybody is there because a series of life events put them there. And that is what we are called to do, is to look out for one another, to take care of one another, to take care of the people who don't have someone to take care of them. That's why I do this now. Somebody in the last session asked something if it would be difficult for me to share if I get triggered. And I do, all the time. However, I still think the greater good is for me to use my story for awareness, because I know that somebody here is listening, and either another survivor is going to come forward and say, I don't want to be in this world anymore, or you guys are going to walk out and see it in your community and make that phone call to help somebody who's in need. I don't usually just talk at people like this. I really do like interaction. So I would like, if you guys have anything you want to say or ask, to just jump right in, because I'm happy to do that too. If anyone has questions or anything they want to say. Yes, ma'am. How I got into trafficking? My very first trafficker was a boy at my high school. Somebody on the football team, somebody who I knew, somebody who befriended me, and he first sold me right out of my bedroom window with my parents asleep. And then he traded me to my second trafficker. And that's kind of how it works, is they kind of pass you around. And even when they're not trading you, it's safer sometimes to have someone taking care of you. And so I've made those choices in my life also, where I've had to look at two different bad people and decide which bad person is better for me and what I would have to do in order to stay with the one that I think is the least destructive. And that carried on throughout my life. Yes, ma'am. For those of you who couldn't hear, she was asking about the supply and demand in the Johns and what can we do. The first thing is prevention, right? We always want to start with prevention, with human trafficking too, but we're also talking about what we do afterwards. But prevention. If you cut off the supply, right, there's no more problem. If you lessen the demand, there's no more problem. Our problem is that people buy children. The US is #1 in the world for buying children. Doesn't happen somewhere else, it happens right here. So what we need is stiffer penalties for people who buy children. What we need is stiffer penalties for the Johns. Right now in the state of Florida, Polk County just finished a sting last week for human trafficking. They recovered some survivors, and there were, 70 Johns or so in that mix. Those guys, it's a misdemeanor, so they can bond out for $50 or $100, spend one night in jail. There is a $5,000 fine that's attached to buying sex. However, often that gets pled down in court. And so they end up getting out on just their bond and they are done. They might have a couple court fees and that's it. It's not enough. It's just not enough. And if we could do something about that, it would change things. If you thought you were going to pay $100 for sex, and if you get caught, you get a slap on the wrist and a little fine, it's not that big a deal. If you think that you're going to lose everything when you buy sex, that would make it a very big deal all of a sudden. And so stiffer penalties for sure. And I'm all for calling it like I see it. Just like everywhere I would go and people wanted to call me names, I think it's quite okay for us to call some people some names and say that person buys sex. Whether it be from a child or a grown-up, it's not okay to buy people. I don't think I should have to tell anyone that, but it's not okay to buy people ever. And so there should be stiffer fines for that. Yes? We would love to. Most schools won't let us come in to talk. Schools are doing human trafficking training now. It's a very watered down human trafficking training. First of all, no one wants to talk to kids about sex in general, okay? Now, we also don't want to tell kids all the bad things in the world because we don't want to scare them, but also how do we protect them? The number one way that people are being recruited right now for human trafficking is through social media. I bet everybody in here has a kid or knows a kid that has a social media account. That is how they're getting through to the children. And like I said, it's a slow pushing of boundaries. It's not right away. So they become your friend on social media. Now, when I grew up, you had to know me to sell me. You had to get up close to me. You don't have to do that anymore. You just have to have access to them online. And so what they do is they build that relationship. If I asked my grandson, who are your friends? He would name his friends in school, right? But then if I said, who are these people online that you play with? He would also think those are his friends, even though he's never met them. We need to change that with our children because they think these people are their friends online. They're not people that they know. They're not people whom they've ever met, and quite possibly not people who are who they say they are. And so teaching our children that they can't think everyone online is their friend, because that's how traffickers get in. They start grooming first. They start getting to know the child. They start saying things like, oh, yeah, your mom's mad at you this week. Well, yeah, she just doesn't know you. And, you know, I would never be mad at you for something like that. And they start slowly isolating the child from the family. They start pulling the child away. They start telling the child more and more nice things. And they come at you easy. Everybody wants it to be a grand gesture. We see kids getting trafficked for coins on a video game, for extra lives on a video game. I have 4 boys. And at any given moment, 2 of whom are hardcore gamers. If as a small child you would have said, send me a picture for extra lives on a video game, they would have jumped hook, line, and sinker. Because that's how they just wanted to play those games. That is how they're getting to boys. And boys are now 1/3 of all human trafficking victims under the age of 18. I would love to talk in schools more, but we're not invited in to the schools, and we have to be invited in. Yes, ma'am. Well, exactly what you're doing now. First, raising awareness. When you vote, vote for people who understand that human trafficking is real. We go, like I said, across several counties. Polk County is different than other places. Your sheriff here knows that human trafficking happens. Lots of places, the law enforcement will tell you it doesn't happen in their town. They're wrong. I have clients in every single town. So yes, it does. but they don't want to face it. So that's part of it, is making sure that you get people in your community who are willing to say that it exists and willing to work against it, and continue to ask for spreading awareness. Like, ask, can we come to your schools? And if you want to work directly with us, we always need help. Trafficking victims lose a lot of life skills because they were never taught. And so if you think, for 17 years of my life, nobody taught me anything, okay? Not school, not a person, not anything. Think of all the things I didn't know how to do. And so all of those things are what we need help with. We need people who can sit with survivors and just teach them how to do a resume and fill out a job application. Where do you pay your electric bill? What do you do if your electric bill's going to be late? All of these things, anything you can think of that you know how to do, that you do every single day, is something we didn't do for all those years. And so we need people to walk alongside and teach us. We need help financially. It costs a lot of money to do this. One of the things that people can help with really easily, $10 gift cards to fast food places, because that helps us when we're dealing with trafficking survivors out in the streets. I can take her somewhere, I can buy her a cheeseburger and a coffee, and we can chat for half an hour. And that gives us an in. And so that's another way that you can help. Just being more educated yourself. And if you want to work in this field, I am always hiring. You can always reach out to me if this is something you want to do. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Sure. So I'm slightly embarrassed to say, but he and I have since talked, but I promptly ghosted him after he paid for my first semester. Now it's a running joke of ours that Marianne just disappears, and that's what I do. That's what trafficking survivors do. We just kind of disappear sometimes. And so I quit talking to him. I was like, I felt I owed him something, and I didn't want to owe him something, so it was easier for me to just not see his face. And so that's what I did. But I stuck with the school thing. He at least taught me how to fill out the FAFSA, and I was able to continue on in school. But it wasn't that easy. For the next 10 years, my final trafficker was my husband. And so for the next 10 years, I was raising children with this man. I was the team mom to his coach on every football and baseball field we were on. I was out in society with him. He very much was telling people that I still belonged to him. And so people wouldn't date me, normal people wouldn't come near me. He very much was keeping control of me. And for the next 10 years, he kept control of my mind, even when he didn't have control of my body anymore. If he told me to do something, I did it. If he showed up at my house and said, I need a place to live, I let him live there. And so for 10 years, we did this weird dance of I didn't know how to get away from him completely, and always under the guise of it's for the kids, but that's their father, but you have to allow their dad. And so society told me I had to allow that. His whole family told me I had to allow that. The court system told me I had to allow that. And so I believed it. And so I spent a decade trying to figure out how to raise children with someone who was extremely abusive. There came a point where I recognized that he was messing with my head. It took a long time. And at that point is when I finally quit talking to him altogether. And then once I quit talking to him altogether, I was able to find some real healing. And I was able to really get a grounding on who I am outside of him. And so since that time, I spent more time in therapy, and I spent more time on working on just me and figuring out who Marianne is. And then I was able to, I would say now that he and I have a friendship, we'll call it a loose friendship, where we can talk and have conversations and it's just fine, but we don't need to hang out together. Anybody else? Oh, that's a good one. So when I realized what my life had been, I knew that I had bad boyfriends, I knew I had abusive boyfriends, and I knew that I was dirty. Those were the things that I knew. I was sitting in the training and checking off the list of what is human trafficking. I already had a master's degree. I was working on my PhD. And so I already had some time out. I was still very much friends with my final abuser while I was hearing all this. And so once I recognized what it was, is when I was able to really make the change and really see what it was. I didn't talk to my kids about it. They knew that my life was a mess. They knew I was a drug addict. There was no hiding that. They knew that I was sketchy on a lot of things. They knew that I lied. They knew that I stole. And so they knew those things about me. So it wasn't a far leap for them to understand the rest of it. And so I did sit them down one at a time and explain to them what had happened and what life really was. And most of them were like, that makes sense. Because they knew that life wasn't normal. They knew that their lives didn't look like their friends' lives. They knew that their parents didn't parent properly. And so they weren't surprised to hear that there was more to the story. My oldest is almost 33, and then it goes down to 24. And they're all good, like really good. So good I can't even imagine how they turned out the way they did. My oldest was 7. No, he wasn't. He was 7 when I met my final abuser. He was, I guess, 11 or 12 when I walked out of that world. And so his life had been just being in that world. That's what he knew, was being around just awful things and abuse constantly. I wasn't a good mother. I say that to a lot of places, and people think, oh, she's just saying that. I wasn't a good mother. I was abusive. We were homeless a lot. I didn't know how to take care of them. That planning for the future thing that I said we don't have, if I don't know how to plan for the future, you know what that also means? I don't know how to pay rent each month. I don't know how to pay the electric bill each month. And so we were homeless a lot. We got evicted. I quit counting, I think, at like 13, 14, 15 times. That was their life. It was constant moving. It was constant maneuvering, manipulating the system to get what we needed just to survive. And so I am so proud to say that they didn't pick up those habits, because a lot of kids would have learned those skills and stuck in that life. And all of my boys are good. Some of them are married with babies of their own, working in jobs that are, they get paychecks and taxes taken out and all those things, all the things that I just never really thought they would. They're not drug addicts. They're not criminals. They're not any of the things that they learned from watching their parents. And I'm incredibly grateful every day for that. Anybody else? I don't know how long we have or even what time it is. Yes, ma'am. So for work, it comes through referrals. DCF is a big one. When DCF finds children who've been trafficked, they reach out to us. Law enforcement. Law enforcement will call me in the middle of the night, and I'm okay with that, and say, I've got a victim, can you come talk to her? And usually it's, will you come get her to talk to me? Because she's not talking to the police, right? And so they do want me there to see if I can help get her to be ready to walk away. But we know that that takes a lot of time. But we get the referrals from community members too. Teachers call up. It's everywhere in the community, but primarily for the kids, it's DCF. We work with kids ages 10 to 28, and the reason we do that is so that way when they pass that age 18, most agencies drop them, and then they're like me, they're out in the world and nobody knows what to do with them anymore. And so we stick with them to help them get through those hard years of trying to figure out who you are. I mean, you guys can look back and think of that first 20 to 25, did you know anything? You know, I mean, you need help. You need somebody to hold your hand through some things still. You're not, even though society says you're a grown up, there's a lot of lessons still that you need. And so we stick with them till they're 28. Our caseload, so each member of our team, and we have counselors and mentors and advocates, their caseload is 17 per person. So each person can have 17 clients. Our safe home can take up to 6 girls at a time. I will say 17 trafficking clients is a lot. We tend to be a bit needy. But also 17 sounds like it's not that many also. And you're right. We are on a wait list all of the time because there are always more victims out there and we just don't have time. Okay, so different things for different roles. For the clinician, I need you to have a master's degree in social work, mental health counseling, something along those lines. For the advocate, we only need to have a bachelor's degree, and that can be in literally anything because it's someone who is a community expert and can connect people to the community. For survivor mentors, a high school diploma is necessary, and I need you to have lived experience, meaning that something about your life relates to the girls and boys we serve so that you can understand it and walk alongside them. Mm-hmm. Are you going to send me an application? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Yes, ma'am. In that case, I would. If you know you're not going to see them again, you're a one-stop kind of thing, then I would always offer the number, and I would always ask the question, are you tired? Here is what I know, is that when you are tired of being abused is when you're ready to leave. We can take it day after day, week after week, year after year. We don't actually leave until we are exhausted from living. And there's only 2 ways to leave. There's death or there's getting out. And when we get to that point is when we're finally willing to try something different. So I would say, are you tired of your life? And I would give her a number to call and say, whenever you're tired, you call that number. That phrase has resonated with every survivor I've ever worked with, that they all recognize that it's just exhausting to live that way. It's a program. So the program is set up to last 6 to 9 months. Very few of our girls graduate. That's not really meant for them to graduate. It's meant for them to be able to get to the next step. And so for some people, the next step could be a foster family. Some people, it could be going home to parents. Maybe parents just needed some training to help with better boundaries or something like that. So it could be for a good reason. It could also be for a bad reason. They're in a safe home. They're not grateful. They're not excited to be there. It's all voluntary, but they've been kind of forced into volunteering. And so they don't want to be there. Often our girls run. Often our girls commit crimes where we can't let them come back, or they have to stay gone for a little bit before they can come back. And so that happens frequently. But it is set up for 6 to 9 months. We've had a few graduate in the time that I've been there, but most often they leave early. But like I said, it could be for good reasons, but sometimes it's for not so good reasons. For the traffickers, it'd be somebody who's very controlling. Somebody who has a lot of girls around them for some reason, or none. Back in the day, it would have been only the ones that you saw with a lot of girls around. But nowadays, because of social media, you might not even see their victims. If you watch the stings every day, there's somebody in your neighborhood that you don't know that all of a sudden pops up on the website of having been arrested, and people didn't even recognize it was happening. There was a child pornography sting, 3 or 4 weeks ago, in which the perpetrator, who was using his own child to make the videos and sell, was living right here in the community, going to work, dropping the child off at daycare, going to all the same places that you all go to every day, and people don't recognize that. It's hard to say what a child predator looks like, and so it's really hard. And in the movies, a pimp always looks one type of way, and so that's what you would have in your head of what a pimp looks like. But if you looked at my traffickers, they were businessmen, they were white, they were respected in the society. My husband was the football coach. My husband was the baseball coach. All y'all's kids went to him. And you loved him because he won those games. And nobody recognized what was happening behind closed doors. And even then, when I tried to reach out to a friend at that point and said, hey, here's what's happening, they didn't want to hear it. It's too much for people to handle sometimes. They don't know what to do with it. And so it's really hard to say what an abuser looks like, because they look like all of us. Yes, ma'am. That's a very good question. Yes, I always say that I was really set up for the life that I had. My dad trained me so well on abuse and on withholding affection that I was primed for somebody to find me and abuse me further. I like to tell people that I say that there's a scent. I can recognize a survivor anywhere. It's like we just know each other. I can also recognize an abuser anywhere, that I just feel it from them after having been in that life for so long. But because of the way my dad treated me, because of how he groomed me, without ever selling me, just groomed me for this is how you behave, I knew that that was part of my life. I thought this was how I made money. I thought this is how I got things. That is what he taught me. And so that is naturally what I would just be close to. And so, like I said about the nice guy that tried to date me, I don't even know how he got close to me to even ask me out once, because that's who I was around. As I was around more abusers, I gravitated to those circles. And then once drugs were part of it, I gravitated towards those circles. And so it took a long time for me to even recognize that pattern of behavior. I'm single, and I say it kind of facetiously that perhaps that's because I really have a lot of red flags that pop up anytime I talk to anybody anymore. That maybe I am too careful watching and too scared now to even try, because it hasn't worked so well for me in the past. But you're exactly right. It did teach me everything I needed to know to be in those worlds. My first husband hit me one day. He hit me a lot, but the first time he hit me, I went back to my mom and I said, "Hey, he just hit me like in the face and everything." And she said, "Oh, I'm sure he didn't mean it." And so the second time he hit me, I told no one. And then it was just what he did. That's just how we were. I knew I would do this, or this, and he would hit me for those things. Did I stop doing those things? No. I just knew I was about to get hit. And that was just part of life. I think we have a few more minutes. They gave me a sign. Does anybody else have any other questions? I wish I could tell you that. Here's what I know from my life. I can recognize somebody very quickly. It's kind of like a parlor game, although it's not quite so funny, but I can look around a room and point at different men and tell you how much he would pay. I don't know how to teach that to people. What I know in working on these stings with Polk County year after year, the people who come to buy sex look like everybody you see. They're businessmen, they're students, they're family men. I've sat there with a man just this last week who cried because he said, "I'm going to lose my kids over this." But you still came here. You knew that that was an option, and still here you are. I had a man tell me, "I'm going to lose my career if this gets in the newspaper." Okay, but you still came here to buy a person. Well, that's kind of what I do when I'm sitting there with them, is I remind them that that girl is a person. I remind them as many times and as loudly as I can in the time that I have them with me. But I think you're right. I don't think they see us as people. Society doesn't see us as people. If I'm tricking on a street corner, you guys are all walking right past me. You're not stopping to talk to me. You're not offering me a cheeseburger, and you're definitely not stopping if your husband's with you. You're ignoring me too. I don't think that we are seen as people by much of society. I don't think the Johns see us as people. They just see us as a thing, and that's part of the problem. I'll also say that most of the Johns, if you talk to them, pornography is somewhere in the problem. And so porn addiction is a real thing. And what pornography, and I wish we had more time, but what pornography does to your brain is it changes your brain chemistry so that you need a higher threshold of excitement in order for you to be aroused every time. So the more porn a person consumes, the more they need sexually to be gratified. And so that's where buying sex comes in often. I can't ask my wife to do these things, therefore I will go somewhere else and get this person or thing to do it for me. Anybody else? Thank you so much for having me here today, y'all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mary Ann. We're going to take a break, and then your schedule will come back here at 2:10 for our wrap-up session with everybody together. All right?
Thank you. Their own, so I'm just going to put it in the stand and you can just take it. It's already going to be on.
receiving a symposium survey. We would like for you training you'd like to see here in Lake Wales. A simple yes will not help us a great deal, to be honest with you. So we should have asked, what other training would you like to see? So if you could kind of elaborate on that a little bit and then fill in the other parts of this. We have on our panel, as we are getting ready to close out, of course, Dr. Marianne Thomas, and she has been sharing with us throughout the day, and Katie and Parchment. And then we also have with us Alan Wilkett, who is retired from Pasco Sheriff's Office, and for part of his career, I don't know how long, maybe he'll tell us, he worked in the human trafficking arena and still is active in that with some advisory capacity. So thank you for joining us and being here today. We going to see, do you guys want to make kind of any opening comments to this? You want me to go straight into Q&A?
We're going to have him tell a little bit about it.
Let's do that. Have Alan share a little bit so we can get caught up on who you are, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Testing 1, 2, check.
He's running back up there.
Is it running?
Give him a minute.
Oh, so give it a minute.
Yeah.
Hurry. Run. I'm very shy. Testing.
All right.
So my name is Alan Wilkett. I am retired from the Pasco Sheriff's Office. I retired last year with almost 27 years of law enforcement. In those years of law enforcement, I had an opportunity to do quite a bit of things with law enforcement, from patrol, courtroom security, any of the investigative things you can think about, whether it be major crimes, property crimes, crimes against persons, child abuse investigations. Worked undercover for a while, which was kind of a cool gig. My daughter told me I could never do that again because I look too much like a cop now, even though I didn't have a uniform on. So I was like, okay, maybe those days are over with. Ran a narcotics task force and so on and so forth. About the only thing I never did is I never had a dog. Well, I take that back. I have a dog. He just happens to be worthless. He's a big old 110-pound German Shepherd that is just absolutely worthless. But otherwise, I've had an opportunity to do just about everything else in law enforcement. Worked with the Pasco Sheriff's Office for 15 years, which of course I retired from. And the last, probably 9 or 10 years of my career, I dedicated to ending human trafficking. So I headed up our human trafficking task force. Still I've sat on federal task forces for human trafficking, statewide task forces on human trafficking, and still sat on some regional task forces and so on and so forth. The only reason why I mentioned that is probably some of the questions you may have, the answers that I give are obviously going to come from a very strong law enforcement background, which means, and I always have to put this, and Dr. Marianne knows this, I always have to put this disclaimer in there. It may come off as kind of law enforcement. It will not be politically correct. I try to soften it sometimes, but it sometimes sneaks out that some of the work that I've done. I believe that we ought to look at it as a real issue and not stick our head in the sand. and act like it's something that's pretty or it's easy, because it's neither of those things. So, so that's who I am in a nutshell. I have the opportunity to work with great people like One More Child and the work they're doing, which, by the way, I had the opportunity to walk in kind of at the last part of Dr. Mary Ann's presentation, and I just think that she is just amazing. So I just absolutely admire her and admire the other panelists as well, and we've had an opportunity to meet over the years. So it's just been, it's been an honor to be asked to come and share just a little bit at the very end of this, and believe it or not, my drive over here will be longer than the session. So, and then my drive home will be longer as well. So I had a lot of chance to prepare, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone. It's really good to be here. I look forward to the questions and some of the things that we can talk about, and believe that this is just going to be an amazing, and I'll say one thing just to kind of wrap up my part. Dr. Mary Ann, when she was talking just at the end, and I mentioned it to her during the break, she made a comment that I found to be really kind of fascinating at the end of her comments. And she was talking about, you don't really see me. We're just kind of the invisible people of society. People walk by us and they don't see us. And I told her it reminded me of when our task force, we would hit the strip clubs in Pasco quite often, and the Asian massage parlors and things of that nature. So we were constantly in there doing what our lawyers said we had to call them compliance checks, because they like those soft language. We called them raids. And they kept telling me, Alan, you can't call them raids. And I said, okay, we're going to go on a raid. And I was a constant thorn in their flesh, because it's always supposed to be a compliance check. But we would go into there. We were in there one day, and it was in the middle of an afternoon, and I actually took 4 of our politicians with us, which was very interesting. And I had told our state senators and a couple of our state reps, you guys hear about human trafficking, you hear about sex trafficking in clubs, you hear about things that are going on behind those flashing lights with the free pizza buffet flashing on the light. You hear, but why don't you go and see what it's really like? And to my surprise, they consented to go. And so we took them with us, and we would go in and secure the facility, and then we would walk into the clubs. And we were going to the northernmost club that Pasco County has. That club was called Icon, and I don't mind, I'll say names, I don't care. I get sued all the time, so I'll just say names. So it was Icon, it was the northern one on US 19, which, by the way, has now burnt to the ground. And I have to always use this, I had nothing to do with it. I promise, I have an alibi. I was not anywhere around when it burned down. But we walked into that club, and it was absolutely happening, middle of the afternoon. A lot of men in there, a lot of the girls were dancing. It was just a really happening club at 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon. And so we walked in, and I walked directly past the stage and into the dressing room, because we have an ordinance in Pasco County that we passed that requires the strip clubs to put sex trafficking signage in their dressing room and in every bathroom stall. There's a reason for that. There's a law enforcement reason for that. We worked with a survivor to create the language. So they had to post 2 signs. One was the Attorney General sign that you see at rest areas and truck stops and things of that. And the other was a plain language that a survivor had put together that used language they would understand if they, because a lot of times you say, are you a sex trafficking victim? And I don't know that I have ever had someone look at me and say, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. Because they just don't really understand some of the terminologies and some of the things that have happened in their life that lead to a definition that we might understand. So we use plain language. And there's an ordinance in Pasco. It was the first one in the state to pass this particular ordinance, which now several counties have it. But what it allowed law enforcement to do is it allowed us to walk all the way into the club without any announcement that we were there. We could just walk directly there and inspect to make sure they had that sign, which means I could move through the club. Before that, it's private property, so law enforcement has to have probable cause to get, to get into the private property, and they can stop you from coming in. So used to, the only thing we could do is inspect whether their liquor license or their business license were current. And guess where they would put those two licenses? Right by the door. So when you walked in and say, hey, I'm here to check your business license, oh, right here it is. Glad you're here. See, it's all together. Here's our liquor license, by the way. That's as far as you could get in. When Pasco's passed this ordinance, it allowed us to move into the dressing rooms and into every bathroom, which is where they may be without their pimp or trafficker being there, and it allowed us to get there. So we walked directly past, walked into the dressing room. There was a young lady there who was snorting a line of coke as we walked through the door. She lifted up her head. Her eyes were banging out of her head. By this time, it hit her hard. She's banging there in the dressing room, and she looks up and sees me in full uniform with tack vest and all that stuff on, and she goes, oh my God, the popo are here. And as soon as she says that, one of the guys tapped me on the shoulder and said, Alan, you need to come see this. And I walked out of that dressing room, and we walked, he said, down where the VIP is. And so we walked where the VIP was, and it's a hallway at Icon, and there's a VIP section of VIP rooms where they dance the private dances, and there were 3 rooms, and they were black lights and curtains across the rooms. And he said, something going on in there, and I pulled back the curtain, and the act of prostitution is taking place right there. One of the girls is on top of the guy, and they are having sex right there in this room for money. Of course, when we walked in, she looks up and she jumps off of him, and she's trying to put her little outfit back together and he jumps up and he pulls his pants up and he's trying to zip his pants up, and he's looking at me like, oh no, you know, all this is going on very quickly. And they asked me, they said, what do you want, and I don't have time for a presentation, but what do you want to do with this guy? And I'm going to tell you something. To me, the buyer is as equally culpable for the trauma that's being put on that victim as the trafficker is. Yeah. Because if there wasn't a buyer putting money into the market, there would be no need for a supply.
Right.
And we in Florida have got to get serious about going after the buyer so that the buyer realizes it's not a misdemeanor notice to appear in court, but it's going to be a felony if you buy sex in Florida. So my response to the guys was arrest him. No NTA, no notice to appear, he goes to jail. And I may not be able to keep him there, but he goes to jail, he takes the ride.
That's right.
Well, what else? I said, and by the way, and I was kind of kidding, I said, on the way out, just march him 2 or 3 times around the stage. I found out later on, I think it was like 7 times. It was like the walls of Jericho. They just marched him over and over and over around the stage and took him out there. I wanted a warning sent out to the club. We're not tolerating this stuff. What about the girl? What about the girl? I started talking to her for a minute. Of course, she was crying by this time, and she said, I know I'm going to jail. I've got 17 charges already on my record. Here she is, 20 years old with 19 felony charges and some misdemeanor charges. What kind of cycle of trauma has not just the trafficker put her in,
Right.
but society has put her in? How does she get out from that?
Right.
How does she get a house? How does she go to college? How can she get to be a nurse, which is what she really wanted to do? She said, before I go to jail, though, let me just show you a picture. And she picked up her phone and tapped it, and when the screensaver come on, there was a little boy and a little girl on the screensaver. It looked to be maybe 2 or 3 years old. And she said, these are my babies. And she said, I know I'm going to jail, but please don't tell my kids what I do. My heart broke. I'm standing in a VIP room of a strip club with a tack vest on and pepper and handguns and all the stuff that we go in with. And I'm standing there, man, my eyes are starting to water because I see her weeping. Please tell me that's a choice when you can't even be proud of what you're doing enough for your kids to know. And her statement to me, and I could tell you about an experience with one of the state senators. I won't do that today, but when she looked at me and began to weep, she said, I don't even understand why you're talking to me. And I said, what do you mean? She said, because nobody sees us. Nobody sees me. thought the cry out of the human soul that I heard that day, because everybody wants to know they matter to somebody.
That's right.
And nobody sees me. And I thought, as Dr. Marianne was talking about that statement, I thought about how true that is, that oftentimes there are people in our society that we don't see them anymore because we simply put labels on them. And we see labels, but we don't see them.
That's right.
We see whore, prostitute, tweaker. But what about them? Because in my view, and I know this isn't popular to say, but they are fearfully and wonderfully created in the image of their Creator, and they have a right to be seen.
That's right.
So when Dr. Marianne talked about that, it just struck that chord deep in me about that experience in a strip club, because everybody, and I'm so glad that she's been seen now. And her dream is being realized, because instead of going to jail, she went to wraparound services to get her life back on track. Somebody that day saw her.
That's right.
Not what she did, but saw her. Oh, that's me. That's right.
Good.
I just want to say, if you were in my last session and you heard me talk about the powers of manipulation, he's here and he drove a really long way. I'm just saying, I still got it.
That is so true. That is so true.
We had a question over there.
If you got a question, I'm the guy with the mic.
Who are the legislators that we can call, text, email, that this is an important issue for us, that we want laws that are stronger and sentences that are longer? Who do we contact?
Fantastic question. So I'm going to answer that in two ways. Number one, contact yours, the one that represents you, and let them know this issue is important to us and that there's some things that are going on. So I'm going to give you a couple things. A couple of years ago, we were part of passing Senate Bill 540, House Bill 851, which created the DSO, the Florida Alliance to End Human. It created a lot of training, hotels and motels to be trained. There was a lot of good things in that. This year, we're working right now with a Florida, and Marianne sits on that with me. We're working as a legislative working group to propose a couple of new things. And one of the things that we are asking the legislature to do this year is to take sex buying from a misdemeanor to a third-degree felony. Not even the second time. We really want that to be the first time. We want to send a message in Florida that sex buying is no longer going to be tolerated, and it's not the good old boys club, and it's not what all good boys do. It's not something that's cool. It's not something that a rite of passage. It's a crime to buy another person. And so that legislation is going to be going into this legislative session, and probably, and I'll give you a couple who are very champions in the Jackie Toledo out of Tampa. She's the one that sponsored last year's bill, which was very good. Looks like she'll sponsor this year's. I would also mention Senator Lauren Book out of Miami. She is a strong advocate for children. So I would mention her name as well. Senator Diaz was the Senate sponsor of that bill. So there's some, and there's others that we could talk about. Wilton Simpson, who is now out of there. He was my senator. And is going to be running for Ag Commissioner now. But great people that are doing really good work up there. But those are some real champions. But again, what I would stress is get a hold of your rep. Get a hold of your senator. Let them know this is important to us. And let them know that we expect you to get behind these bills when they come up there. Let's make Florida, it has been for years. Florida has always been recognized as kind of one of the leading states on the anti-human trafficking stage. We've lost that in the last couple of years. And some other states are kind of taking, I think we should be number one. I think we should lead the nation. So, because we got a big problem, right?
think the question is, does anybody know who our representative is here?
I'm not sure.
So, what is set in place for preaching the gospel and sharing Christ with like the ones that buy, and then also with the victims?
So can you,
Like, preaching the gospel.
Absolutely.
One more child.
It's the only hope. And I'm not going to take all this. You guys answer this as well. But I want to say this about this. I believe, so let me back up. So out of the, and I don't know what the numbers would be, but literally, if you look at cases that I've either worked, consulted, advised on, trained on, whatever that may be, we're probably talking about in the hundreds. Marianne mentioned earlier that every case that I personally have ever been involved in, pornography has been there. So pornography is absolutely a feeder band into sex trafficking. Everyone. The other one's going to be dope. Drugs is going to be part of that as well. The other thing that I've noticed about most traffickers, and I can't say 100% because obviously I don't know 100% of the traffickers, but the traffickers that I've dealt with, they need Jesus as well. Because a lot of them have trauma in their life. And so they're living out circles of trauma that are building in them. And if we just put them in prison, what happens when they come out? Because they're going to come out someday. Even when they buy children, the sentences are such, they're going to come back out. They're going to come back into society. And if we have not dealt with their heart and not just held them accountable for their actions, but dealt with the heart that drives their actions, then really what we've done is we've only handled half the problem, because the real problem comes out of the heart. So, and the church is the one well-positioned to really deal with that, to preach the gospel. In law enforcement, obviously, you know the restrictions that I had. Thankfully, I don't have those anymore, but I had those restrictions of being able to share those things. The church is well positioned. That's why the church needs to be active in doing this. We need to treat the whole man and not just one part of the man.
And some places have like John courts where they have to go and get some rehab and get some training and understanding about how the role they played within this. So it's not necessarily that it's faith-based, but they do have some kind of responsibility that they have to understand that they put towards this industry. But like he said, the church plays an important role. I know one organization we've worked with in the past who supplies us with like Go Kits for survivors, they put a little word of encouragement in a little red envelope just about the gospel and that they're worthy and whatever else for the survivor who's recovered and who gets that bag. So it could be subtle ways of reaching out. It could be your church forming its own little ministry to go out and just do outreach at rest stops, at truck stops, in your community. But it's going to be important for everybody to play a role, because certain agencies, you can't say, well, you can't mandate that gospel be a part of what's taught to whoever's recovered, because everybody has religious freedom. So everybody who wants to play a role could play a role. It's just what role you play is going to determine what you do.
I'd like to add to that too. For those of you who talked about or were here when I talked about my personal story, part of that story is, you heard me say that I still talk to some of my traffickers, right? That's called forgiveness. And I don't have that except through Jesus Christ. Marianne Thomas could not have forgiven those people for what they did to me. However, through Jesus, I do forgive them, and I really don't have any ill will towards any of them. And I recognize their own brokenness and their role in my life. I know that they didn't come to me because their life was perfect and then abuse me. It didn't work that way. Right. They had been victims themselves, which allowed them to then in turn abuse me. And so that's something that I always think about too, is I don't want y'all judging me, and so we don't judge other people, right? And that means the traffickers too. It's all about Jesus in the end. I wouldn't be here without him, and I know how important it is to spread that to anybody else who I encounter. And I make sure every person I hear from, that they hear that Jesus Christ is what got me out.
Especially at Florida Baptist, where they have the opportunity. You want to talk a little bit about the porch light and some of the things y'all are
Yes.
able to do with the girls?
Well, we are a faith-based organization, and we were Florida Baptist Children's Home since 1904. And then in the last few years, we rebranded as One More Child. But because of that, we are a faith-based agency, and I am encouraged to spread the gospel every day in my work, and that does help. But I also know that for me personally, I wouldn't do this work without being able to do that, because I do recognize how important that was in my own recovery.
So what do you guys think needs to change in order to normalize the conversation of trafficking and the mental trauma that the victims actually go through when they are being trafficked?
I mean, one of the things I'm a big proponent for having that conversation about trauma and how it affects how we live, our health, and how we are thriving and surviving. And so part of normalizing it is integrating it in different parts of how we are daily living. So whether that's through the pediatrician office, whether that's through the school. A couple months ago, I saw the Pasco sheriff have a news conference about a young lady who was missing, and one of the things that he said was she has a high number of ACEs. And so even integrating it in conversations, press conferences, dialogue about people is important, because now it's like, no, we need to understand that this child is displaying a trauma response and not just a bad behavior. And so once that becomes a part of our everyday dialogue, then I think that will help to normalize it. But have those conversations within the school. Have those conversations. I love that Highlands County has a soft handoff when they have a child who is coming into care, so they could understand the trauma, and when they go into a new environment, understand that this isn't just a kid who may act out because they're being bad, but a kid who has experienced a lot of trauma. So let's normalize the conversation by integrating it in our work, integrating it in our interaction with each other, so that it doesn't become that elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about.
This question, does One More Child have a prevention class or course for students, since the average human trafficking age is 12 to 14?
We don't have a prevention class per se. Part of the problem is that people don't want us to talk to children about sex. And so we are more than happy to go into schools, into churches, and speak to youth groups and talk about what grooming looks like, what they should look like in their own lives or in the lives of their friends. But often we're not invited in, and that's because adults are afraid of us to talk to children about sex in general.
I know at one point a couple years ago, Heartland contracted with Sail of Freedom, another organization, to have them come and do a My Life, My Choice kind of course with kids within group homes. But again, that's just one small population of kids, and it's not really a curriculum that's going to move along with them. Once they're gone from that group home, they're going to miss whatever additional sessions. But it's important for us as community members to reach out to our church groups, to reach out to our community centers, our nonprofits within our neighborhoods, to try and get the message out to those kids. So it may not be that they're going to a course per se through One More Child or Heartland or anything else, but it may be a 1-hour session that would make all the difference, with a speaker coming in to say, hey, these are the experiences I've had through my work, and I'm trying to help you prevent from going through something similar.
And the only thing I would just, and this is not to add to, because these were complete answers in and of themselves, but the one thing I would say is don't ever discount the vital role of being a parent and the role of prevention. You know, I just spoke to a large group of parents, probably 300 parents that came into a gym, an auditorium, and we talked about, you know, the dangers that their kids are facing, and we on purpose didn't let the kids in that class. And the reason being is because I could talk very blunt to the parents, and plus I was going to expose some of the apps and social media and gaming systems and things of that nature that are being used to both recruit and groom their kids. By the way, the latest statistics show, and there's 4 stages to human trafficking. You've already covered that today, but the 4 stages of human trafficking, the top 3 of those stages, 60% is now being done online. 60%. When I started in my career, it was a sidewalk transaction. It was a vehicle that came up to a sidewalk, and you had, you know, the prostituted person who was walking the track or the blade, and the vehicle would come up and that transaction would happen. Now over 60% is happening online. It's happening through social media, and there's 3 types of social media that you really should be aware of, and which one's the most dangerous. There's apps, like calculator apps, that look like a calculator on your phone. They add, subtract, divide, find the square root, do all that kind of stuff. But if you put a certain number sequence in, it rolls over and it's a vault. And in that vault is text messages, pornography, videos, contacts they don't want you to know about. And when you walk in, they swipe up and it rolls back over and becomes a calculator. These are things that sometimes parents are not aware, grandparents are not aware that these things are out there. And all you have to do is go to the App Store and just type vault into the search bar, and it'll throw down photo albums and calculators. These are the, you know, encrypted messaging systems, all that kind of stuff that's there. And gaming systems. My 11-year-old son was recruited, or attempt to recruit him, on a gaming system, an Xbox One. So knowing those things as parents and being aware of those kind of things, and you may not be digitally savvy, and I understand that, but there's great resources like Coveted Eyes, Bark. There's a lot of different things out there that can help you and assist you to overcome some of those challenges as well. So don't diminish the role of a parent. Being engaged with their child, as much as it doesn't seem like they want you involved. Be involved. I always say this, don't be their best friend, be their parent. And take that role again in that role of prevention.
A couple of you have talked about the role of pornography in this industry, and so I was just wondering if you could kind of elaborate a little bit on what that looks like for the sex trafficked, as well as, you know, I know a lot of people are the mindset that, you know, if I'm viewing pornography, it's not really hurting anybody.
Every survivor I know, it started with a picture. Every. So that definitely hurts someone. That's when I talked about the gradual pushing of boundaries, that's what I'm talking about. It's real easy to send a picture to someone you think is your boyfriend. And then what happens when he shows the entire school? Or what happens when he threatens to tell your parents and then requires you to do more in order to not be found out by your family? Every single survivor I know, it started with a picture. And that's why pornography is so bad. Forget all the things I said earlier about what it does to your brain chemistry and all those other things. It is the gateway into sex trafficking.
And just to follow up with what she said, in my experience from the law enforcement side, I mentioned to you that every case that I've ever had a part of, whatever that role is, whether it's working it, training on it, consulting, advising in it, whatever, every single one of them, pornography was one of the feeder bands. And dope would be the other one. But they had that commonality. That was the overlay that would happen in that sex trafficking. And I want you to think about this, first of all. Pornography, the making of pornography, by its very core, is sex trafficking. It is commercial sex act for something of value. The only reason why it's not necessarily a sex trafficking chargeable offense for an adult is because you have to have force, fraud, or coercion. So force, fraud, or coercion are the elements that I would have to prove in order to make an adult case of sex trafficking. However, if it's, and there's really no such thing as child pornography. I call it child raping on film. But what happens is when a child's involved in pornography, I don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. On its very face, that is sex trafficking. So when you look at pornography, and the roles that I have seen pornography, both for the buyer, creating that appetite, creating an expectation, creating that window, as Marianne talked about. I can't ask my wife to do that act, but I'll go buy a person who's really not a person anyway. They're just a convenient item for me to act out my fantasy on. I can buy that person and make that person do what I just saw in that pornographic film. On the other hand, for the victim, most of the time when pornography is used with the victim, it's a teaching tool. I have seen when we've walked into hotel rooms, you see a child in some cases sitting on a bed watching some of the most vile pornography you have ever seen. I mean, with animals, you name it. And they're being told that when that dude comes in, when that buyer, that John comes in here, this is what you're going to do to him. It's a teaching tool. They're teaching them how to perform. And they're using pornography to do that. So you have both a buyer equation and you have a victim equation in this, and you see those roles that pornography is playing. And it is absolutely, in my view, one of the things that we as society, and particularly, and I'll just come to the church since that's where we're sitting right now, the church needs to start taking on this issue. It is uncomfortable. It is something the church has always kind of shied away from because you can't really say sex from the pulpit. If you're not going to say it from here and talk about these issues, I promise you a trafficker is going to talk to your kid about it. I promise you somebody at school is going to talk to your kid. And I'd much rather have a parent or someone who is teaching that responsibly to our kids to take on that issue. And we need to take that on in the church, that pornography is not okay.
I have a question. I have some good friends of mine that have a 17-year-old daughter who poses very provocatively, does provocative dances, and posts them on social media. And here recently, she has been found to be talking to an out-of-state 16-year-old boy. And my friend's daughter has seen this boy, so she surely knows that he's 16, but we all know that age can be deceiving. And she's lost interest in normal activities that she used to love doing, youth group, school activities, things like that. And it sounds like she's going down a road that she could very easily be targeted for this, or is already being targeted. And I don't know what I can pass on to help prevent something from happening. I can say that her parents are very involved. I mean, they're on top of things. They're in counseling, taking away phones. They're constantly talking, but I'm at a loss as to what to do, and I've been thinking about this all day.
Yeah, so I'm going to just share from a law enforcement what that is legally and what I would do if that case came to me, how I would start on that, and then let Marianne and my friends up here kind of take on the what should I do type thing, because that's what they're really good at, and I'm not. First of all, if it's a 17-year-old, even taking pictures of themselves and then shooting that across a digital platform, phone, digital platform, an online platform, you already have transmission of child pornography, period. Period. Underage. I'm sorry? Yep. Yeah, and I agree with that, totally agree with that. But they'll oftentimes, if they're not using that, they'll use another one if they want to do it. They'll find a way. But my point being is they're transmitting child pornography already. You also have sexting that is going on when you're involving another one, and the person who receives that is receiving child pornography. Law enforcement, if they're under the age of 18, is going to treat that as sexting under the sexting statutes first, and then move to the heavier felonies if they need to. So there's some ways to do that. The other thing, and I think that was a good point, is those devices are mine. I told my kids that very quickly, that phone is in my name, and I always collected them at 8 o'clock at night. They all came into my possession, and they went into my room, and they got them back the next day. So that was the way I kind of treated some of those things, to prevent some of those things from happening outside of but you're not going to be able to prevent all of this if they're at school, if they got friends. So having those real conversations about how serious those things are could be one avenue, but I think the ladies up here would have probably a better way to handle that. Just from a law enforcement, you already have transmission of child pornography.
From a parent's side, why aren't we blocking that person? If we feel that that person is an unhealthy person for our child, why aren't we stopping the contact to that person? Just like if your child walked up to somebody on the playground who was going to sell them drugs, you would tell them not to talk to that person anymore, and you would take active steps to keep them away from that person. You can do the same online. You can block people. Now, they might know ways around that, but you can block people, and you can take away devices. And parents should always have all of their children's passwords. They should be able to log in at any time and see whatever the kid is doing. Parents have to be proactive here.
Yeah, I agree. And even without the element of him, because I know we kind of discussed it a little bit, some of her actions were already taking place. I would encourage them to continue to try and seek the help that she needs. And they may not be the person that she needs to speak to. And so the therapist or whoever she's going to also may not be a good fit, and that's why she's not disclosing. But there's something there where this is a trauma response. And if we're seeing changed behaviors, they're not, because it's natural for a child to let go of one thing that they like and attach to something else. But if she's letting go of everything that she likes and not attaching to anything else, not wanting to engage with other people, being secretive, then those are some red flags for even depression or even something else that may have happened, why we are now seeing a trauma response with her acting out sexually. So I would encourage them to continue to seek the help professionally that she needs and not be the only one in this fight with her. Sometimes it's that person who is just undercover, has not gotten arrested yet, has always put a personality or persona out there that they're top-notch person, and who has been plotting all along. So I would encourage parents to stay active, stay involved, and use your discretion. If your gut is telling you everybody loves this guy, he's a top coach every year, but something about him is off for me, then follow your gut instincts and pull your kid. Ask your children. Tell them, my kids know that they should not have any secrets with any adults or anyone. Now, it's okay to have a surprise, because surprise me with some flowers or dinner. It's okay. Surprise me with that. But surprises eventually are revealed. Secrets aren't. And so if somebody's saying this is a secret between us, then we need to be having conversations with our children that, hey, no one should be having secrets and no one could threaten you. And if someone's threatening you with hurting me or you or anybody else because you did reveal a secret, then come tell me, because that can't happen. And so I think it's that dialogue with the children too, because that trusted person may not be trusted after all. But sometimes it's hit or miss, because sometimes those people don't have a criminal history and don't have anything that stands out as them being a predator, but in all actuality they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, that's already in play. So the Senate bill that I talked about, 540, and House Bill 851, which passed 2 years ago, one of the things that we created in that was a sex trafficking registry. So a buyer's registry, a John registry, as it's called. In Florida, if someone is arrested for the first time for buying sex in Florida, they're supposed to go on this registry. It's like a sex offender registry that they go on, which is front-facing, which means the public can search it as well, to know that, hey, I'm going to check this person out and make sure not only are they not a sex offender, but they're also not a John. I will tell you that that was the most pushed back element of that bill. So when I testified in front of the Florida Senate on that particular bill, SWAP came to every one of those sessions and testified in opposition of that. The other group that came, which shocked me, I was stunned, was the Florida president for the NOW chapter, the Florida chapter of NOW. And I thought, a sex trafficking bill, and you've got the president, the Florida president of NOW, standing up in front of the Florida Senate opposing a bill to protect our kids and to protect our women and men that are trafficked.
Can you tell them what NOW is?
National Organization of Women. SWAP is Sex Workers Outreach Project. So they fancy themselves, they got a big presence in Orlando, a big one in Tampa. They represent themselves as being kind of a labor union for sex workers, or in their words, prostitutes. So it's just boggles my mind. But in that, they're supposed to be on a John registry. We've had a really kind of hard time getting that implemented. which I think is a travesty because it's in law now. But this bill would strengthen that to be able to say, not only will you get the third-degree felony, but you'll be lifelong in a John registry as well. So it's part of that accountability. No, it doesn't follow them into Florida. It's a Florida arrest that would get them there. And there's the reasons behind that is because the other states would have to create the same thing so that there would be reciprocity. And since other states do not have that, there is no such thing as reciprocity. So it would only be for a Florida arrest.
I see a hand over there. Go ahead. And I love that. We have to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to be the bad guy and shut this off. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, I know. Your mic's not working. Here, you can use this one.
Am I good? I'm sorry. I have to be the bad guy and shut this off. I get you. They, you might be able to corner them and ask a few more questions if you want, but thank you very much. This has been very... So the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So there's been a movie that's been mentioned a couple times today that we've been told that human trafficking is not to be in our mind like the Hollywood version in the movie is taken. So Liam Neeson says in there that I have a particular set of skills.
That's right.
I have a set of skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. And I do hope that we want to be the heroes of this and continue to acquire those skills to make us a nightmare for this particular topic. And you guys certainly are doing that on the front lines, and thank you very much. The middle sentence that he threw in there was, these are skills that I have learned over a very long career. This is just the beginning, I think, for what we need to do to continue to act. And hopefully we'll find ways to do that individually within our ministries and organizations and collectively as a community. Continue to do that on this topic and others similar to it. We want to present a gift to you guys that here in Polk County are on the front lines of serving women specifically that find themselves in these situations. And I know that both of you, Katie and Marianne, go out on a lot of evenings with law enforcement, and you are there on our behalf to meet these women. So, Pete, real brief, tell us what we have here in these bags for them to take with them and use.
I got to witness firsthand that they're going to need a lot of this stuff In these kits are tubs, individualized tubs that have t-shirts, socks, first aid kits, a diaper changing station. There's baby stuff, women's, feminine products, and a huge bin of wet wipes. So I know this is a travel kit. I have a very tiny car, and I'm a giant human, so I know that this will fit in my trunk of my car. So it's for you to be able to take as a team wherever you need to go. And we individualized each component so you can reload it. And in a back room back there, you're reloaded again. So we want to commit to your ministry. We love what you're doing. We believe in every child that's going to be touched by this and every woman through the care center. So we're praying for all of you. We're sending that with you as well. And then I think Rob has something else to present.
So we, again, want to thank First Baptist Church for hosting us today, along, obviously, with those that shared with us. We're going to close in prayer. Pastor Markley is going to come up and do that for us. And then once we close, you can feel free to, again, visit the booths, network amongst yourselves, or chat with them for a few more minutes. Please be respectful, however, of their time. They need to get on the road back to what they do. Pastor Markley?
While he comes up really quick, don't forget you get a certificate for attending today.
Yes, sorry about, thank you. Turn in your surveys on the way out, and as you do that, we have certificates for you. Some of you can use those for credit from various places, so certificate for your attendance. Thank you, Katie.
Why don't you stand with me? Father God, thank you for these servants of yours who continue to make a difference in the lives of individuals who we see, who they see, and Lord, as they continue to make a difference in our communities, Lord, we thank you for their compassion toward victims and how they have aided in recovery. We thank you for their passion about declaring the sin and the transgression and the deplorable reality of trafficking in our community. And so we pray you'd continue to put wind in their sails to do the work that you've called them to do. We thank you for your grace that's transformed them. And Lord, we ask that your grace be operative in our lives as well, Lord, that we might be not just made aware or have information, Lord, but the question will be, as we leave this place, will we act? Lord, will we be advocates? Will we advocate politically and create awareness around in those in our social circles and our spheres of influence? And so, Lord, I pray that we'd go here committed to act, Lord, not, as James would say, not just to be hearers of the word, but doers, Lord, that we would seek to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with you. So, Lord, help us to make a difference in our community. Thank you, Lord, for these people who've committed this time to come and learn and pray. Bless us now as we go and seek to bring about justice in our community. In Jesus' name we pray.